Call to order the special board meeting of November 14th at 5:30 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be led by the board.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Supervisor Akavetti?
Here.
Treasurer Lofato?
Here.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Joseph?
Here.
Trustee DeMuynck?
Here.
And Trustee Vosper?
Here.
Request an excuse for Clerk Various. She is in jury duty. Any objection?
No objection.
Item number 4 is closed session. 4A, discussion regarding strategy and negotiation sessions pursuant to Section 8C of the Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Trustee Joseph, support by Trustee DeMuynck. Deputy Clerk Niza, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph?
Aye.
Trustee DeMuynck?
Aye.
Treasurer Lofato?
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti?
Aye.
Trustee Vosper?
Aye.
Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Motion prevails. We are in closed session at 5:37 p.m.
No, they are.
Do I have a motion to re-enter open session?
Motion go back into open session.
Motion by Trustee DeMuynck.
Support.
Support by Trustee Joseph. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Trustee DeMuynck.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosper. Aye. Treasurer Lofato.
Aye.
Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Motion prevails. We are back in closed session at 6:27 p.m. Item number 5 is the regular agenda. 5A, recommend ratification of the 2018 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement representing the IAFF firefighters. Do I have a motion? I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Akavetti, support by Clerk Barry. Discussion.
Mr. Supervisor, if I may,
Trustee Joseph.
we've been a long time coming in this particular contract. Obviously, I can't discuss what was, debated and deliberated on in closed session. I can only speak for myself. I'm proud of the bargaining team. I have full faith in the recommendation that was brought to us, and I'm appreciative of the effort that was done. I've tried as best I could to lobby my fellow board members to vote no on this contract, and the reason is simple. We began the negotiating process over a year ago, and we asked all the other unions to come in, and we opened the books and we showed what we could pay as a township, what their neighbors could afford to pay for the services that we had, and with those numbers we asked them to modify their health care, and the compensations were fairly universal. For over a year, the health care that the majority of the township employees waved goodbye to has been a benefit that the firefighters have received. The compensation package here is significantly more than any other union. And when we ask our unions to come in and sit down with us, and we open the books and we engage in a process like that, and one union is able to benefit in such a greater way than the rest, coupled also with the way that these negotiations, and I'm proud of the board for not negotiating in public. We've done our best to keep that into closed session. But the dog and pony show and the circus and the personal attacks that were lobbed at members of this board when a structural issue was brought into the equation and drawn into the ongoing parallel in the negotiation, I took great offense to that. I feel that the township should move forward to 312 arbitration, and I respect those who see it differently than me, and I also respect our township attorney, labor attorney, who very clearly indicated that legislatively this union is different than the other unions. And so I respect the fact that there's things that we are not able to do in certain negotiations with one unit and those that are 312 eligible. So taking a look at the entire package, I have a real hard time with this contract, and I unfortunately will not be in support of its ratification. Thank you.
Treasurer LaFatta.
Similar to Trustee Joseph, I was on the bargaining committee. When asked by the other bargaining units in the township, I stressed that every union within the township was going to be consistent with what they were getting for wage increases, step increases, and medical benefits. This probably no longer going to be true, and based on trying to maintain some credibility with my fellow employees, I don't think I'm going to be able to vote to ratify this contract.
Any further comments from the board? Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. I think Trustee Joseph and Mr. LaFatta have some valid points, and they've articulated them well. I also believe in what they have said. It's the way I look at this. However, my support of this contract, not necessarily, say it's kind of a mixed thing. I'm just kind of concerned of the expenditures that have gone into this negotiating process so far and the benefits that the township as the employer are going to receive out of them, from it. So at this point, I'm prepared to support this contract just to stop what might be an additional cash flow as far as the negotiating process. Thank you.
Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. While I don't think this contract reflects a lot of the things that I would have liked to have seen, and I think that Trustee Joseph did a very good job of articulating some of those things. I share some of those sentiments as well. I also find myself more so probably agreeing with Trustee Anderson in that at this point I believe that this is the best course of action for the township. I believe that not only the monetary costs that we could incur, additional monetary costs, but also the opportunity costs of not getting this particular piece of business done and over with outweigh any further potential benefit or any other things I would like to see us squeak out of this contract. So therefore, I will be supporting this contract as well. I think it is a good first step, and I look forward to the future rounds of bargaining being even more productive and beneficial to the township and to our service delivery because of the approval of this contract.
Any further comments from the board? I'd like to thank the bargaining team with special thanks to Director Duchesne and former directors Burke and former Director Herpich. This contract is a year behind the rest of them, but it's one that I am very, very proud of. I am very, very proud of the work that team did, and I'm very proud of the contract and what it's going to mean for the future of this township from a fiscal responsibility standpoint. We do have more work to do. It would have been nice to have this done a year ago with the rest of them. Thank you, and I am proud of this contract, and I urge a yes vote. Motion by Supervisor Accavetti, support by Clerk Berry to ratify for the ratification of the 2018 through 2019 collective bargaining agreement representing the IAFF firefighters. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Supervisor Accavetti.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee DeMuynck.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer LaFatta.
No.
Motion prevails. Item 5B, approve the conversion from a fully funded insured base employee health care funding mechanism to a township health care self-funding mechanism. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve as stated.
Motion by Clerk Berry. Support by Trustee Vosberg. We do have our benefits broker from Cornerstone. Thank you so much. And Director Duchesne.
Thank you, Supervisor and members of the board. I do apologize for the kind of the date staring you in the face of January 1st and making this such a, I guess, an urgent task, but I do feel very strongly in the recommendation based on the analysis that Cornerstone Municipal Advisors have prepared, and internally we've had a number of discussions. I do want to not say that I'm from the government, so I'm here to help you, but there is certainly a situation here which, based on experience, self-funding can result in significant savings instead of the traditional premium payments. It comes at some calculated assumptions that could be less favorable than positive, and in my experience, the first time that I was involved in a conversion to self-funding, the first 5 years, there were two bad years and 3 really good years. And we did, in that municipality, break ahead. There are significant, though, guarantees by having stop loss that'll be explained by the experts here, and I'll let the team from Cornerstone do introductions and take over from here. But the reason I'm recommending this, and through the work of Manager Burke and working with the consultants and the township officials that participated in this, I think we're bringing this forward because I see more upside than downside, more positive points of analysis than negative, a track record in service in 2 communities, even smaller than this one, in numbers of employees where it turned out beneficially and positive. So I do not recommend much of a risk to you. Once a thorough examination of the facts are presented and you analyze those, I think that the projected savings from typical standard premiums going to an insurer are well worth the modification in the plan. And if that, with that, turn that over. John?
Thank you. Good evening. I am John Vance, Account Director from Cornerstone Municipal Advisory Group. We are the Township's healthcare consultant. And with me is Kimberly Coulis, Account Director from Cornerstone Municipal as well. So does everyone have a packet in front of them that, okay, looks like everyone does. So to reiterate what Steve had said, thank you for the introduction, is we are here to discuss a recommendation to convert the Township's Blue Cross contract to self-funding. So we're going to start by flipping to the very first page, which is page 2. Before we discuss self-funding, I want to give you a high-level overview of what you have today, because the township currently is something called fully insured. The way your fully insured contract works is that you pay set guaranteed rates to your carrier for your actives and pre-Medicare retirees. Those rates do not change for a 12-month period. However, even though your rates are fixed for that given year, behind the scenes, as all of your actives and pre-Medicare retirees incur health care claims, those are being tracked by Blue Cross. Those claims will be used next year to build your rates. So you still own your claim experience, but in a given year, you are paying fixed set fees and set rates.
And as we begin to talk about self-funding and the features of self-funding, the 2 components of a self-funding contract is you have your set administrative fees, which is a set fee by Blue Cross for 12 months. And then we're also going to talk about stop loss protection, which is also an administrative fee that you pay to buy protection against large claims. So those are and then there's the second component, which is the actual claims, which can be variable. So you'll have your set administration fees for 12 months, but then the variable piece will be the actual health insurance claims that are happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, so to simplify, and of course it's more complicated than this, but to really simplify, because you own your claim expense today, it's just a matter of when do you pay it. Do you pay it this year, or do you pay it next year with trend? Your claim expense is your responsibility. This really becomes a fee discussion. And it also becomes a timing issue as well. So your current contract, you pay set rates, If your actual claim expense, though, is lower than those rates, you never get that back. That is Blue Cross's revenue. Okay, so they keep that. But once again, if your lower claim experience exists, next year's rates will be lower in according to the lower claim experience. But you will never get back what margin there was in the current given year. So this really becomes a fee discussion, even though once again, you're going to be self-funded in the given year, because the fees do vary quite a bit from a fully insured plan versus a self-funded, which we'll get more into the meat of that momentarily.
Also, with the features of the self-funding plan, we're able to do more innovative programs with self-funding. So, your monthly expenses will vary depending on how your claim experience goes. But the biggest thing is that with a self-funded plan with Blue Cross, or with whatever carrier you may be with in the future, if it's not Blue Cross, is you can integrate wellness programs into the system, which with the wellness programs will help you manage your chronic and your pre-chronic conditions, and it will help potentially lower your self-funded costs as well. But that's a big thing that, currently in your fully insured plan, you're not really taking advantage of under the self-funded plan. You certainly could create some additional programs for your employees.
So if we go to page 5, it's where we will discuss stop loss. Because a concern that you may have would be, well, if we are self-funded and we have to pay our claim liability, do we have infinite liability? And the answer is no. You will purchase something called specific stop loss. This is actually something, whether you know this or not, you have stop loss in your current plan. You just don't see it because it's behind the scenes. The current stop loss in your plan, for a fully insured plan, where they track your claims, is $100,000. So the self-funded quote also assumes $100,000. But let me put that really into English, what we're saying here. For all of your active employees and pre-Medicare retirees, those are called contracts. That could be a single individual or a family of 8. That's a contract. So every contract, you will be protected if their claims exceed $100,000 for medical and prescription drugs in a given year. So that is your limit. So these $1 million claims, it cannot hit you. Your limit is $100,000 per contract per year. That is your max liability. And that's for medical and prescription drugs combined. That's very important because over the past 5-6 years, we have seen an explosion across the country in the cost of pharmacy. And so those are combined costs that are integrated into this proposal. So again, it's not death by a million cuts. You do have a cap to your liability.
So you might be thinking, what are some of the changes that we'd see when we go from a fully insured contract to self-funded? So there's a couple. The biggest concern usually is, will we have the same benefits? Will the employees have access to the same network of doctors and hospitals? And the answer to that is yes. So with Blue Cross Blue Shield, this is simply a change of funding mechanism. So the benefits would not change for the employees, and the network of hospitals and doctors would be exactly the same as they have today. They'd still be in their community blue plans. They'd still have access to all of their pharmacies and their doctors that are available. Blue Cross would provide to us, even though you're self-funded, they would still provide an illustrative rate to us, and that would begin in, you'd have illustrative rates that they would provide, so they'd still create like a single 2-person family rate for you, and that would be beginning in 2020. And from Megan's perspective, she'd be using those for maybe if you had individuals on COBRA, you would still need those illustrative rates for some of your charge outs. The payment method, as John alluded to, would change a little bit. So depending on how the township wanted to pay, whether they were paying weekly or monthly, that process would change, and we discussed that with the executive team and the finance director on how those payments would change. The next 2 items, the health reimbursement account charge and then the commission payment, is something we'll talk about on the next page, because we're going to go into more detail on how that works. And then lastly, there would be an advance deposit in hospital prepayment to Blue Cross at the beginning of the year for the self-funded program.
How much is that? Sorry, I don't know.
We have it.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is where we get very, very nuanced. There are 2. Bear with me one moment. All right, there are 2 prepayments. One of them is a hospital prepayment, which is the way Blue Cross is able to obtain the best hospital discounts in Southeast Michigan, because they pre-fund hospital claims and no other carrier in Michigan does that in Southeast. That is a hospital prepayment of $76,000, which is factored into the financial estimate you'll see on the next page. Okay, that gets reconciled either year, slightly up, slightly down, based on actual usage. So you're not paying the full amount each year, you're just paying kind of the delta, if you will, a little up and a little down. So the hospital prepay is one expense. The advance deposit is essentially, and again, we're getting into the weeds here, is what we call a run-in.
I like the weeds, I'm good in the weeds.
Okay, perfect. I love the weeds. We've got all night. If I take the microphone and start walking around, be concerned. So what the advance deposit is you have, right now you pay rates. If you move to self-funding, let's say January 1st, you're not paying rates, you're paying claims. But claims take a little bit of an incur period where someone will go in and have a service, but the payment takes a little bit of time for the payment process to go to Blue Cross, apply discounts, and then for it to eventually be billed to the member and for you. That's a run-in, meaning your claims will go down quite a bit in the first couple of months. Well, what Blue Cross does is they actually have you give them an advance deposit over the first 2 months of about $300,000, which is 2 months of claims approximately. So they're basically having you what we call mature the first 2 months. So that once again also gets reconciled out, plus or minus each year. But that is the advance deposit that really takes the place of claims that are running in instead of paying the premiums.
Are we able to ask questions at this point? Because I don't want to lose the question, but, so if I have we have a stop loss at 100K, that's my max, right? Why am I putting a deposit down of 300K? Aren't I 200 over the stop loss right at that point?
Well, no, that's across everyone. That's across all 160 employees and retirees.
Say again, I'm sorry?
That 300,000 is across all of your active employees and pre-Medicare retiree claims.
Okay.
So that's across everyone. So yes, you are right that you have a cap, but everything underneath the cap is your liability. And so that's what it's doing. You're pre-funding the run-in of you will have claim expense. And the reality is you have claim expense now underneath your plan. It's recognizing that you're going to have that claim expense regardless. It's just going to take a little bit of time to run in.
Paul's fluent in my language. Do you mind if, Paul, can you
Sure.
tell me if he's got it right?
Well, my understanding is we have 160 contracts, and for each contract, we have a $100,000 deductible
Yes.
for the umbrella plan.
Yes.
Stop loss.
Yes.
So we could have an exposure actually of 160 times $100,000 before we get any insurance money from our stop loss carrier.
Is that right?
Yes and no. Yes, that would be.
Maybe once you get through the end of it, I'm sure you'll get to this piece
Yes.
of it.
Correct. And to give you an example, a little context, because we'll get into those, because that's a fair question that I want to make sure we all understand. But just to give you some context, because again, you have large claims right now that occur. You just don't experience them immediately. You experience them the next year with trend. How many do you have a year? Last year you had 1. The year before that you had 2 across your entire population. Okay, so you are correct that yes, a worst case is 100,000 times everyone, but that's just not reasonable. It's not going to happen.
I realize that. But based on our past experience costs, we were at a point where we were negative $350,000 with them in losses. Increased our insurance coverage dramatically every year. Based on that historical data, where does that put us on? I know from experience with a smaller group that's self-insured, the larger the risk is. And I usually look at our past data and look at how it's moving forward and backwards to understand what our possible
Sure.
risk could be on our past. And if we were $350,000 in the rear, and this happens again, based on this stop loss, there's not going to be there won't be a $291,000 savings. It's going to be money out of our pocket.
Right, and I'll get to that savings momentarily, but just to back up to where you are right now is if you stay fully insured and you have those high claim years, that is literally your liability. You're just paying it next year with a trend margin on top of it. You don't escape your claims.
In the form of the premium increase?
Yes, exactly.
The next year?
Yes. So your claims, you do not run from them. They are your claims. You own them. The only difference is do you pay them now or do you pay them next year? So, but with self-funding, The fees, which you'll see momentarily a slide or two from now, are substantially, and those are guaranteed. The fees guaranteed are reduced. So whether your claims increase or decrease in ebb and flow, they're linear to whether those claims are fully insured and you'll pay them next year, or they're self-funded today. What is not linear is that your fees truly do diminish substantially. So if your claims do go up, let's say in this next year, you move to self-funding and your claims go up more than you anticipate. That may happen. But what is guaranteed is your fees went down, and if you stayed fully insured, that same claim expense would have happened, but now would have happened next year. Now, on the other side of the coin is, and you actually have had this in the last year, you're being overcharged by Blue Cross. Your rates are exceeding your actual claims. Blue Cross keeps that. They do not refund that money. That is theirs 100%. So on the high end, you were going to feel that anyways just next year. On the low end, you're currently losing. And you now also get the benefit of the fixed fee reduction. So actually, I'd say let's go right into that.
On page 7, John?
Page 7. So what we have on page 7, and I know this might seem counterintuitive, is our claims drive our cost. Well, they do drive your cost, but they drive your cost regardless. It's just a timing issue. Okay, so this illustration here on page 7 is really a fixed fee differential. We're showing your total projected cost under insured versus self-funding. These will vary. They absolutely will, up or down, because your claim expense will vary. But your claim expense would have varied whether you're fully insured or self-funding. It just would have been this year or next year, you'd feel that. But the fixed fee difference is guaranteed, so let's actually walk through that. The first row we have here says claims, fixed fees, and recoupment. We show what those expenses are. Essentially what that is this is claims, any recoupment to Blue Cross, and your administrative and stop-loss fees, essentially. Right now, through the insured plan, it's 3.2. If you go self-funded, it's $3 million. It goes down by $222,000. That includes the increase also of the hospital prepayment. So how did your fees go down $222,000? How is that justifiable? And there's a very good explanation for it. And by the way, we've done this with about 10 Southeast Michigan municipalities in your same situation, some smaller, some larger. We've done the same thing over the past 5-6 years. So we've lived this, we've experienced it, and we've been able to do retros as well. So how is it justified that your fixed fees, because your claims aren't going down, they're the same projection here, by $222,000? And it's a little education on how the state of Michigan works. The state of Michigan Insurance Department, they require all fully insured carriers, Blue Cross, non-Blue Cross, it does not matter. If you are a carrier that offers fully insured coverage to any group, including you, the state forces that carrier to have certain requirements called pooling and retention charges. Those pooling and retention charges, Blue Cross doesn't just sit on those and sit on that cash, they pass it along to you in your rates. So you are paying pooling and retention charges. Those don't exist when you're self-funded. When you're self-funded, pooling and retention convert to administrative and stop-loss fees. So really it's as simple as pooling and retention minus admin and stop-loss minus $222,000. It's truly a fixed fee guarantee reduction because one of them is a state fee that applies only for fully insured, the other one doesn't apply to self-funded. So that goes away, that's gone, end of story. The next row, I apologize for the acronym, PPACA is Healthcare Reform, Obamacare, ACA, however you refer to the federal law. There are quite a few federal taxes and fees, and even a state fee, that some apply to self-funded groups and fully insured groups, some apply only to fully insured groups. Your projected state and federal fees, now this is not admin and stop loss, these are just taxes and additional fees. Your projection for the upcoming year is $129,000. By going self-funding, because a few of those fees do not exist if you're self-funded, your fee expense goes down by $105,000. That's just guaranteed. So your fee reduction is guaranteed. Your claims may vary, but we see that as really linear. Now, of course, from a cash flow perspective, you need to be able to budget within a given year. Because right now, if your claims go way up, you have a little time to budget for the next year. But your claim liability is still something you own. We just see it as kind of the incurred versus when you pay it. You're incurring it regardless. Do you pay it now or later? But you could take advantage of a substantial fee reduction. The other row here, HRA and commissions, we'll go to the footnote 3 to explain this. There are currently 2 items that are in the line 1 of the current insured. They're in the $3.2 million number. They get broken out separately when you self-fund. One is HRA, which is the health reimbursement account that the township utilizes for its pre-Medicare retirees. That is now billed direct versus part of the premium, and that's about $2,400. Okay. The other component is how we are compensated to work with the township, which is through commissions. Those are included in the current insured number of 3.2. That's based on rates. When rates disappear, there's no commission because there's no rate. So that gets transferred into just a direct bill. So it transitions. That is $33,140 per year, which gets billed quarterly. So essentially just trying to show you all potential savings or potential costs of self-funding to give you a true net number, and the net reduction is $291,682. So once again, I'd say there's probably 10 communities we've done this with. I would say maybe 4 are smaller than you, the balance are larger than you. We've been doing this for probably 5-6 years, so we're really battle tested. We know, is this too good to be true? Because there aren't many freebies in insurance, right? If there's something that seems too good to be true, it probably is. But this is taking advantage of a funding mechanism change where the impact on you is, instead of having some budget security potentially where you could give a year to watch if you do have large claims. Now the inverse is true too. If your claims are low, you don't get them back. Now you're paying them today. Either way, your claim expense really does not change. It's just timing. The fees are guaranteed to reduce.
Thank you so much to the Cornerstone team for your presentation. I'll bring it up to the board for comments. Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, Mr. Accavetti, I know this looks like we're looking to take an action tonight on this item and agenda item, and I was wondering, is there any way could we agenda motion to address a vote on it at Monday's meeting?
Can you speak to the timing of this and why tonight is critical?
Yes, this is something where there is a process to be able to get Blue Cross to implement this. Also part of this is that the township historically has been a calendar year plan year, January through December. Back in August of 2017, the township was transitioned to an August through July plan year, which is not what the township was used to or intending. And so this would transition you back to a calendar year, January through December plan year. Knowing that's the case, and we're already mid-ish November, there's a process that needs to still occur to get this up and running so it's flawlessly implemented for January 1st.
So in essence, we're kind of locked in if we're going to go with this. We got to do it tonight or else wait till next year, right? Is that what you're saying? In
Yes.
Layman's length or layperson's length? Thank you.
Correct. And maybe I'll see if trustee, any other who hasn't spoken, Treasurer LaFata, then I'll go back to Trustee Joseph.
I'm just curious, have we done a risk analysis? I know based on the fees, we're going to save, $291,000, but has there been a risk analysis based on some of our historical data that created a $350,000 negative with Blue Cross at once upon a time? So we understand that, well, we could benefit by $291,000, but we could be exposed to a risk of X, so that we know both sides of the equation.
Yeah, we certainly have. So the thing about insurance is there's 2 types of risk. There's self-insurance risk, which we're discussing tonight, and there's insured risk. Insured risk means if you are fully insured, underwriters are adding margin, because if there's uncertainty in the market, they add margin. And I was an underwriter. I can tell you, if I was uncertain, I'm adding a little fatter margin, we call it. Okay, so that's being built in whether you use it or not. But as far as looking back at the deficit that you accumulated, that deficit is actually reduced by over 6 figures since you've made your plan change. Part of the reason the deficit was created is because you had plan designs previously that were a little off, they were a little behind comparables, if you will. And now that you've made plan changes, we're starting to see claims go the direction that was intended. So we're starting to see your cost per contract go more in line with what we'd expect for a group of your size.
That really didn't thoroughly answer my question. We have an actual number for savings. Is there any actual number for risk based on what I asked on historical data?
Your risk.
In other words, here's a possible savings.
Yep.
Worst case, what's our risk? In other words, there's two different
Right.
numbers that I would look for.
So the way
to make a good judgment call on whether this is good for the township.
So the way I'd answer that is it's really a 2-year discussion, because no matter what, your fees will be lower by $291. Now, if your claims go up, if you have a substantial increase in claims, that is an additional liability, which you would not have otherwise felt in 2019 because you were insured. We would have felt it in 2020 with margin, with trend. So it's almost a 2-year discussion, because right now it's more of a 2-year process in your current program. Claims happen today, but you're paying guaranteed rates. But if your claims, if you have a very large increase, you're paying those next year. So it's a 2-year discussion. It's really more of a, yes, if you have a large increase, you're paying them now. So that's kind of the risk discussion, is that it's your liability regardless if you pay it now or next year.
I'm looking for a number. I'm not looking for a discussion. Basically, we've got a number of 291 that we could benefit by, but there's got to be, there should have been some kind of a historical data risk number at the same time, so we can judge from one to the other whether, I mean, that's what I would look for wanting to move forward. I would want to know my full exposure based on some historical data,
right,
which I don't think we have at this point, because I'm not hearing a number.
Paul, if you give me a crack at it. Paul, when you asked the question,
now go to make
sorry, when you asked the question, I thought the same thing. What I understood in the answer, and I'm hoping I'm getting it right. You could answer the question with a question. Well, what's your number this year? Whatever that claim is, what you're saying is your risk is the exact same.
Yes.
So if you have a high claim, whatever your risk exposure is now, the difference is not the amount, it's when you pay it. So if you have a $500,000 claim this year, that's your risk this year. You won't know what it is. You're going to pay it. It's just a matter of whether or not you pay it now, or you pay it in the form of increased
yes,
premiums next year. So there is no answer to the number question.
Well, there is claim data based on how much we've, Blue Cross has experienced with our claims. In other words,
yeah, no, I get it. I'm just saying I wouldn't make the decision based on whatever that number is, because it's going to be an anomaly. So if there's a risk, and a very high claim, that claim would have occurred independent of the plan. You're really just talking about the financing of it. So do we have increased risk this year? Well, yeah, if we went with the same plan, we just have to pay that cost next year in the form of increased premiums, because
correct,
we own that no matter what the number is.
Well, I realize that, but actually there could be calculated an actual,
that's a good question. Yeah. Do we have an actuarial sort of assessment?
An actual number for the risk.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So with self-funding, your claims are going to be your claims. You purchase your specific stop loss. The only way where you can guarantee your number, where you have a guaranteed ceiling, is if you bought a second type of stop loss, which you could purchase if you wanted. It's something that most self-funded groups do not purchase, but it's something you could. It's called aggregate stop loss. That gives you a ceiling, meaning if we have specific stop loss of $100,000 per contract, well, what if we have a lot of $100,000 per contracts? We've got to have a point where the bleeding stops, and that point is 25% margin on top of expected claims. So projected claims are expected at, I don't have your number right here on this sheet, but whatever that would be, you had 25% on top. That's the worst case scenario you can ever have in that year. It's called an aggregate stop loss. It costs $40,000 to $50,000 a year to purchase it. We didn't show it in this recommendation because it is something that in our firm's probably combined decades of experience, we've never witnessed an aggregate stop loss claim. It's because you just don't see a group go 25% above projected. But if the decision to self-fund was predicated on we need a number to satisfy pure protection, then you could add aggregate stop loss, and then you have an absolute ceiling, which is 25% above your claims. And again, your claims would have been the same regardless. You're just feeling them now, but at least now you have a cap, which is actually better than you had when you were insured because there was no cap. So right now, if you had an 80% increase as an insured plan in claims, or a 200% increase in claims, there's no cap. You just pay it next year, and your rates explode. So you could add that if you chose, most of my groups don't. You could, like I said, it'd be between $40,000 to $50,000, and then you would know your true limit, and then the claims are going to be what they are. You're guaranteed to have lower fees.
Thank you. Trustee DeMuynck.
Go ahead, Kathy, and then I'll go after Kathy.
Okay. My understanding, you were talking about the 350,000 from, that was amounts that accumulated from prior years. It was increases in payouts above what our premiums were, basically?
Yes, it was a deficit recovery.
Sure. Is that still out there? Is part of that still out there?
Yes, it is.
And
so
what happens to that?
So we've assumed that stays linear. So whatever, because what's happening now is it's being built into your rates until you've paid it. Approximately 6% rate load has been added until that's gone. It takes about 4 to 5 years. We've assumed the same amount it just goes on your self-funded bill now. So that amount does not change.
Unless we change carriers.
Correct. If you change carriers, that will go away. So that is something that we can certainly discuss.
So if we could change carrier and it goes away completely?
It would go away completely as long as you were gone for at least about 3 years, yes. So that is something we're certainly having other...
It's not something I'm looking to do, but I
Correct.
just wondered what happened.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee DeMuynck.
I'll direct this one to Mr. Duchesne. We had a meeting and you said you've used this in some of the other communities you've worked at. How did it pan out for the other communities, without naming them? But how did it pan out when they went to the self-insured programs?
The overall experience was very positive. The years, and I said that you have to gird yourself a little bit because in a 5-year, and I'm sure the insurance experts will say that's what happens. It's just part of the tables. Had a couple of bad years in the first time I put it in place. Concerned about that, but we got very active in a number of areas and programs. Very satisfied. Taking it to 2 other smaller communities, almost seamless. In fact, the last community that I left, when it went to that process, it wasn't substantial savings in itself because we also changed plan design. Gave 4 options under a blue plans that changed things. So there was a myriad of factors that kind of went into that. I'm sure you guys see that in other places. So when you have a number of things happen, you can't just say it. I was sitting here thinking, and I was speculating a little bit, that I bet you there's probably maybe 3 or 4 people who current health care is under a self-funded plan. I didn't have time to research that, but I think that's very possible, and I doubt if anybody's any the wiser for it, really, because of that. But at the executive level and the policy-making level, I'd no longer consider it much of a risk. It's you pay more if you want to be just done with it, pay the premiums and let it go. But I think we can do better than that, and my experience has been it's never become an issue. Had a couple bad years. 4 large claims and an organ transplant kind of claim, and that was a high hit. But still, we didn't have in the 5 years, and certainly in 7 years, it all smoothed out, and it was fine and saved the municipality money.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Trustee Anderson.
Yep. He's around. This is round 2, man.
Sorry. Number 2.
I have a follow-up, but I'll keep it. A question for you, and maybe you can answer the supervisor, and I have a follow-up on it. This hospitalization applies to our active employees, and would it also pertain to our fire and police employees till their age of till they're Medicare eligible?
All pre-65.
Okay.
Current employees and retirees that are pre-65.
Yes.
My follow-up is we got 160 active workers. I don't know how many are retired. And Mr. Duchesne, you mentioned the ship uprighted itself, but the first 2 years was catastrophic, but everything worked out. I have questions on it. Some are being answered here. I appreciate Cornerstone you showing up tonight. The only issue I have is, and I know we're under time constraints here, it's November 14th. It's on the agenda of a special meeting dealing with the police or the fire budget. And we can't postpone it 5 days until Monday because we'll miss the ship on it. I just have a problem with that because I'd like to get back with Mr. Duchesne and a couple other board members. I have some further questions on this before I'd feel unconscious I could vote either way on it. Thank you.
So, couldn't agree with him more. Again, Supervisor McAvetti, the firefighter issue was on last week's agenda. It was pulled, and the opportunity to vet out a few things. I was really unaware until I saw the agenda that this was also part of a special meeting. And I'm not calling anybody into question in terms of the truth meter, but I can't imagine that 2 weeks ago, nobody on the board, at least none of, I knew anything about this, and then it comes on a special board meeting, and it's a, anytime I've been in a position where somebody tells me, it's only available today, I usually leave the furniture store. I'll be just blatantly honest. I can't imagine why this wouldn't be available to us, and I haven't heard dates, but if that's the position, fine. I'm with him. I can't vote for it if it's a, one time only. I got to look at it a little bit, and this is really, the opportunity to see the agenda packet and then have you explain it's just being made available to me tonight. The area that I wanted to get crystal clear on was the issue that you, the slide on page 6. A lot of our employees, well, a lot of our country heard, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. So I really would like to know from you if what you say on page 6 regarding same benefits, same network, the only way the employee will know anything's different is that they'll get a new card.
Yeah, so again, correct. So literally, this is literally in every way conceivable a funding mechanism change, meaning it's how you contract with Blue Cross or your carrier and how you pay them. You are not changing the benefits, the plan, the riders, anything. So plans are identical, networks are identical, formulas are identical, literally zero changes to the member other than a new card. You're changing how you pay your carrier.
Great. The last question I have is more of a sort of a request for feedback, okay? So there is the question Treasurer Lafata poses, what's our risk? And on some level, when you are sort of paying higher premiums and then you're getting the benefit of leveraging those costs or spreading them out over the next year, you also have, or you don't have, I guess is a better way, do you have the equivalent of the aggregate stop loss in that formula? So is there a cap to the liability when you are funding it the way we're funding it now?
No, absolutely not. No.
So if we have a catastrophic, event or several of them, we're not talking about being in any position resembling an aggregate stop loss scenario here. We're going to own the whole thing.
You have specific stop loss, so you're protected up to 100 currently. But
Right.
if you have 20 people go to 100, right now you have 1, there's no protection for that in your current
We're
form
20
of
at
contract.
times 100K.
Yes.
Okay, and so the same mechanism goes into this configuration
Yes.
minus the $40,000 or $50,000 add-on on the aggregate stop loss
If you
option.
choose to purchase, yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I could see another risk for us would be if we took that $291,000 savings and spent it on something else. I mean, at some point, we have to be careful with how we treat this savings, because there could be a history of years when.
Maybe I'll make a quick comment. I think that was addressed at me. Just very quick. I wasn't gonna.
I have no clue if that's part of the plan. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that you have to be careful with these kind of changes because of.
I wouldn't even consider bringing something like this to the board if we weren't in on a path of having some significant fund balance to be able to manage the immediate risk versus the risk that would come tomorrow. Either way, I'm a believer in us managing that risk now and taking advantage of the immediate savings because of the taxes and fees. I wouldn't have been in that position 2 years ago at all. And the difference has been the substantial changes that have been made to our plans, with the primarily the most important thing is a lot of consumerism now. HSA in that piece of it, which didn't exist a couple years ago. So I hear what you're saying. I understand our fund balance, and you're absolutely correct. An irresponsible entity, regardless what that entity is, private business or a municipal entity like us, shouldn't be taking this risk on now.
I do support this. In my prior life, was with the county, and that was
I know.
self-insured.
Yeah.
So I believe in this type of a product because of the potential for savings, especially if you add to it some other preventive type.
I think Treasurer LaFato is next, and then go ahead. Mr.
Thank you, Supervisor. The funding, what I would recommend is that you set up a self-insurance fund. That money goes into the fund for a variety of reasons. It transfers in, and it is not considered part of operations. I strongly recommended that because really at this point we are doing it to save funding. However, there's a longer term picture here, and to make sure that the program absolutely works correctly, I would certainly say that's the best thing to do. Also, there's a cash flow situation, and you are making payments from something. I'd rather not have it run into the treasurer every so often and get a transfer, cover the wire. I think to some degree that's what is done. The last thing I just mentioned, well, I should wait for further questions, but if it's really a struggle for the board's majority, or the whole board, because I'd like this to be absolutely a 7-0, because I think it makes a great deal of sense. I have been advised that certain things have to happen, but potentially we could do it Monday. I would really continue the recommendation, do it tonight, because I just think that's in your best interest. We can protect the money, I think protect the township's interest, and make it work so that we're not at a rush. Again, full apologies. We brought it up because I don't think there was more analysis to do on an administrative level, so it was brought forward. I understand the discomfort sometimes making a transition like this, but I would never recommend anything to a governing body that was a high risk in a short period of time. I don't consider it in that category. So, but my apologies on the timing, but we can work around something if we have a definitive plan.
Treasurer LaFato.
Basically, Kathy, we're going to internally have to create a pool to cover the payments to Blue Cross. That pool should come based on the budgeted money for medical costs for each one of the departments in the township. The fund should pay without discrimination by department out of that fund. It's the practice that I'm pretty familiar with. The only other comment I have is if we put the added stop loss cap on it and save $240,000 versus $291,000, if somebody needs an immediate vote, would be a lot more copacetic to me than a lot of people have to, when you're small, you crawl before you walk. So if you want an answer, I'd like to hedge my bets and add the extra stop loss and put $240,000, projected in my pocket rather than expose the township to more risk.
Yeah, Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I'm in really strong agreement with that. I realize the risk is minimal, but the 40,000 just means that there's 40,000 less savings. So you're still at $250,000, and then you have the ability to say. The other thing that I would also point out, just to my fellow board members, something that Trustee Anderson, I'm kind of echoing, and that is this is a special board meeting. Originally, I was under the impression that it involved a firefighters contract, and I'm fairly comfortable enough to, make a decision. The difficulty is that you have a lot of residents, and this is their money. This is $3.5 million, and I know we already told them that that's what it costs for health insurance, and we're just talking about how we fund it. But there are some pretty sharp people in the township, and I would like to see them have an opportunity to come to the podium and suggest things and hear from them. It's how we make our decisions, and to do a special board meeting that didn't, that involved something initially other, I think it would be prudent to allow them the opportunity. And then lastly, there are some things internally that I would ask for some consideration on, and Mr. LaFata brings up an interesting point. So as you're looking at the pool, how do you spread it out? Do we see the employees as one body independent of where they work, or do we see these as independent budgets? And I'd like to see what our finance director in cooperation with Treasurer LaFata, how we set up these pools. The other problem that I have with funds is we need to have some guidelines on minimum and maximums, because we have, for example, an enterprise fund where we just say we're going to put in as much money as we can put in, but based on what is a very serious question. So are we basing it on 6 months of projections from last year, or 6 months of what the equivalent premium costs would be? All of these things, how much do you put in that pool, are some really good things to consider when we're passing this, 7-0.
A couple of quick answers. I won't bedraggle it. First of all, this is not one of those areas that I would recommend we take from a individual activity area within the budget and transfer to, for this reason. This is concerned about HIPAA, concerned about identification of the type of coverage and things. So if you have a 3-person department, it's going to be very clear level of coverage and a lot of personal information simply by the transaction. You can still account for it. We've worked a lot of spreadsheets. We can account for it down to the penny of who it's attributed to, but it would be highly recommended to be in one pool. So there's no, there's stabilization in the long term of that fund. There's also not identification. 3 months, a minimum 3 months. We have fund balance policies through the GFOA in a number of areas. You absolutely don't want to be below 3 months of premiums. There's also the retention on the recommendation from the insurer. I would say your initial movement to the 291 becomes a savings that also should be looked at as a minimal fund balance moving forward, and give the board some time to get comfortable with this. Again, I greatly apologize for bringing this at this time, but I think you see the opportunity to mesh with the other changes and the contract changes that just occurred. It's not, obviously it is not life and death, and it is a reduction. So I would tell the people, certainly, any way we want to say this, there's probably a majority of people that are working in organizations in the community that actually are self-funded healthcare premium plans, instead of premium plans, excuse me, to this day. And there are a number of other governmental agencies. So I think there's a strong case to make for this movement. And I think everything that's been raised here, good pointed questions. Again, never will run a rush job by anyone because there is only gain, there's nothing negative. So why would we push it hard if there wasn't just significant steps to take? And if we had just, a few more days in time, these people have to work very hard to do that. Even as it is, if we reduce that, I'm sure they're confident, between Megan and I know Cornerstone is confident, they can turn around what you need them to turn around. But I guess why push them into that when we have significant brake lines here, brakes in the fire brake lines are laid, and I think we can accommodate those concerns.
Thank you. We have a motion by Clerk Berry, support by Trustee Vosberg. Unless if there is a motion to amend their motion to approve from a fully insured based employee healthcare funding mechanism to a township healthcare self-funding mechanism, I would move to move forward.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone the vote on this until
Motion
Monday.
by Trustee Joseph to postpone. Is there support?
Support.
Motion to postpone. Clerk Berry, please call the roll.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee DeMuynck.
No.
Trustee Vosberg.
No.
Treasurer LaFata.
Yes.
Supervisor Echevetti.
No.
Clerk Berry, no.
Motion fails. The postponement fails. Back to the motion to approve the conversion from a fully insured-based employee healthcare funding mechanism to a township healthcare self-funding mechanism.
I'll make a motion to amend it so that we add the cap stop loss to this proposal.
Would the motion maker be willing to amend their motion? How about let's do discussion on that amendment. Is there support on the motion to amend with stop loss? Now that we will need more information on that, the amounts and the numbers of that as we move forward. But first, I'd like to get a second. Motion by Treasurer LaFata. Is there support?
My problem is the motion to support, is a motion to support the motion as a whole, and I don't support the motion as a whole. I don't care if you had they have the 4 votes to do it, so I don't think the aggregate is really going to make a difference. So it was brought forward. It's been consulted. Forget about it. It's a loser, in my opinion.
I'll remove my motion.
Okay, motion is removed. It doesn't die for lack of support. Back to the original motion by Clerk Barry, support by Trustee Vosberg, to approve the conversion from a fully insured-based employee health care funding mechanism to a township health care self-funding mechanism. Clerk Barry, please call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee DeMuynck.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Treasurer LaFata. Supervisor Akavetti.
Aye. Motion prevails. Item 6 is public comment. Limit your comments to 5 minutes. Item 7, board comment. Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I'm very happy that we were able to ratify the contract tonight, and I'm also very proud of our firefighters. They've had a couple days of a lot of work going on with a couple major incidents, and I'm glad that they were able to take care of them. And I also, I guess I'm also looking forward to the next round of bargaining agreements, because I think we have some good information that will be able to inform our employees and be helpful to them in that process. Thank you.
Trustee DeMuynck.
I'm also glad we got the fire contract out of the way. I know it's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of questions from members of the board. A lot of people worked together, but I think the negotiating team did a good job. And in regards to the arbitration, who knows what would have happened, but I think it was a good idea. I'm glad that's settled. Also, a lot of incidents, the accident last night, the fire today, thanks to everybody in public safety, both the police officers and the firefighters. Hell of a job, guys, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Like Mr. DeMuynck, I agree with your observations. Our public safety, our police and fire have really been pushed to the kind of more than earning their money the last couple of days here, what's going on the freeway and on Jefferson. Glad we got this contract out of the way. We'll look at this specific issue and see a year from now how wise it is, how efficient it is. And I think we're also talking about the other bargaining units too. What impact will it have with them? Thank you.
Trustee Joseph.
Thank you. Again, I think sentiments have been expressed with regard to the contract. It's behind us, and in the spirit of what things lie in front of us, it's important to be working together. I just for public knowledge, I was a little concerned about some of the things that came out of the contract, and I reached out, talked to Clerk Barry, and I think Treasurer LaFata expressed some of the similar concerns with the contract being on the board agenda last week. So Monday was a little too soon for me to look at all of the details, and I appreciated the accommodation, but the discussions that I had involved the special board meeting, that it was felt that waiting 2 weeks could be detrimental, and that the negotiation was really in need of a fairly quick turnaround. So this special board meeting was created, and again, we've talked it to death in closed session many times. My feelings, I hope I communicated effectively. What wasn't part of the discussion was the item B, There's not one email to me or to Trustee Anderson. I'm talking with him and Treasurer LaFata for the first time really about this tonight. And I respect those who brought it forward because it's seen as a good opportunity and it's been done in other municipalities. But there's a real fragileness on this board. And to bring a $3.5 million expenditure to the board in a special meeting with one participant who's always here. He's like the folding chairs. Mr. Kadich is always here. But to not have this, discussion in a regularly scheduled board meeting, and then a request for really what amounts to 6 days, so that board members could get better acquainted and to accomplish what I think HR Director Duchesne pointed out, it would have been much better to go forward with a 7-0, and I think the communication was put out there that people were more inclined to vote for it on Monday and have a full complement of however many residents wanted to weigh in. I felt in the beginning of the meeting we were taking a step forward in terms of working together, and then we took 2 steps back. It's really, on speaking only for myself, it's not the most transparent presentation. I'm a little disappointed in how it was rolled out. No mention of it, and to come here and be told I've never experienced a sales presentation that was only offered good in a government setting like that in my life. I don't know why the deal goes away on Monday, and I thought I heard from the presentation that it would still be available, although creating some additional work. So I'm very disappointed. I'm not going to elaborate on it because, again, I think the spirit of working together outweighs whatever my frustration is, but I would like you to know, whoever was involved in the preamble to this, let's get this forward. It's not landing on me real well, and I don't think it lands on the residents real well to do something involving $3.5 million in a special board meeting with one audience member here. I think it speaks to transparency, and I'm disappointed.
Treasurer LaFata.
I'd like to take this opportunity to give some credit to Captain Ken Franks and Brian McNair. Basically, without any impact from this contract, they were able to reduce the overtime monthly cost by almost $22,000. This was all done through their scheduling ability and taking over some of the administrative management of the fire department scheduling. The move by our public safety director to make those promotions to captain actually was a return on investment, and I think they should get the credit for it. It has nothing to do with the contract. Thank you.
Clerk Berry.
I have no comment this evening.
Proud of our township. Never been as proud as looking at the TV last night and the terror of that traffic accident on I-94 and the immediate sadness and the shock of how graphic those videos were. And there was one of our firemen in our public safety team, Chesterfield, solving that unbelievably horrific situation. Settling this contract is something that is very, very long overdue. In my opinion, it's about a year overdue when the rest of them were settled. I do thank, again, the entire team. That's the benefits consultant, our labor law attorney, the entire HR team, the board, and the IAFF unit. This was a tough process to go through. I'm proud of them, and I'm proud of the contract in front of us. Next regularly scheduled board meeting is on November 19th at 7 p.m. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
By Clerk Berry, support by Trustee DeMuynck. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? 7:33.